In the autumn of 1942, as winter crept toward the shattered ruins of Stalingrad, more than 250,000 German soldiers found themselves locked inside a battle that had already drifted far beyond its original purpose. What began as part of Hitler's grand summer offensive into the Soviet Union was never meant to end here. The objective of Operation Blue was oil, the lifeblood of modern war, the fields of the Caucasus that Germany desperately needed to sustain its armies. Stalingrad, a city stretched along the Volga River, was initially just one objective among many, valuable mainly as an industrial center and transport hub. But as the campaign unfolded, its importance shifted. The city bore Stalin's name, and in Hitler's mind, that symbolism transformed Stalingrad from a military target into a personal and ideological challenge. By late summer, the German Sixth Army had reached the city's outskirts. What followed was not maneuver warfare, but annihilation at close range. Street by street, building by building, German and Soviet units collided in brutal, intimate combat. Factories, apartment blocks, sewer tunnels, and cellars became front lines. A single room could change hands multiple times in a day. Progress was measured not in kilometers, but in meters, and paid for with blood. The Luftwaffe reduced much of the city to rubble, but the destruction only favored the defenders, providing endless cover for Soviet infantry. The fighting became so close that artillery and air support were often unusable. Soldiers fought with grenades, bayonets, and rifles at arm's length. Survival depended less on strategy than endurance. Despite mounting casualties, German forces continued to push forward. Orders from above emphasized holding ground at all costs. Withdrawal was not merely discouraged, it was treated as failure. The campaign gradually lost coherence. What had once been a flexible offensive hardened into a fixation. The longer the battle dragged on, the more Stalingrad became a test of will rather than a calculation of value. By October, entire German divisions were exhausted, under strength, and pinned down in ruins that offered no decisive breakthrough. Still, the orders remained unchanged. In November 1942, the battlefield changed decisively, not within the city, but far beyond it. Soviet commanders, having absorbed months of losses, launched Operation Uranus, a massive counteroffensive designed not to retake Stalingrad directly, but to destroy the forces occupying it. Instead of striking the heavily defended urban front, Soviet armies smashed into the weaker Axis flanks, guarding the German advance. Romanian and Italian units, poorly equipped for winter warfare and stretched thin across open steppe, collapsed under the assault. Soviet armored columns surged forward with speed and coordination the Germans no longer possessed. Within days, Soviet forces met behind German lines. The encirclement was complete. The entire Sixth Army, along with supporting units, was trapped inside a vast pocket centered on Stalingrad. More than 250,000 men were now surrounded. As temperatures dropped, supply routes vanished. Soviet artillery tightened the ring, cutting roads, railways, and airfields. The German position was no longer precarious. It was catastrophic. German field commanders immediately understood the danger. They urged an immediate breakout while fuel, vehicles, and manpower still allowed it. The window was narrow, but it existed. A coordinated withdrawal to the west could have saved a significant portion of the army. But the authority to act no longer rested at the front. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler issued a direct and unequivocal command. The Sixth Army was to hold its position, and under no circumstances attempt withdrawal. Hitler believed the encircled force could be sustained by air. The Luftwaffe, he insisted, would deliver food, fuel, ammunition, and medical supplies until a relief operation could break through. This belief ignored reality. The transport aircraft required did not exist in sufficient numbers. Winter weather grounded planes. Soviet fighters and anti-aircraft guns took a growing toll. Even under ideal conditions, the airlift could deliver only a fraction of what the army needed to survive, let alone fight. But once the order was given, it became absolute. General Friedrich Paulus, commander of the Sixth Army, operated within a system that valued obedience above independent judgment. Unauthorized retreat was not simply frowned upon, it was forbidden. The German command structure had evolved into one where initiative was replaced by compliance, and deviation from orders was treated as betrayal. As weeks passed, the consequences became unavoidable. The airlift failed. Rations were cut again and again. Soldiers received starvation-level food allocations. Wounded men froze to death in unheated shelters. Horses were slaughtered for meat. Vehicles were abandoned where they stood for lack of fuel. Artillery fell silent as ammunition ran out. Entire units existed only as names on maps. Still, the order did not change. Hold your ground. German units continued to fight, not because victory was possible, but because retreat was prohibited. Soviet forces methodically compressed the pocket, capturing airfields one by one, severing communications and isolating formations. Attempts at relief from outside, most notably Operation Winter Storm, failed to break through. Yet even as the noose tightened, the command remained unchanged. In January 1943, Soviet envoys offered surrender terms. They were rejected. Not because resistance was realistic, but because surrender itself was incompatible with the order. Discipline persisted even as cohesion collapsed. Entire divisions disintegrated into isolated groups fighting without coordination, supply, or clear command. Authority became symbolic rather than practical. Orders were issued that could not be carried out. Radios went silent. Maps no longer matched reality. On January 30th, Adolf Hitler promoted Paulus to Field Marshal, a rank no German officer had ever surrendered with. The message was unmistakable. Death was preferable to capture. But Paulus did not commit suicide. He recognized what the command would not. On February 2nd, 1943, after months of encirclement, starvation, disease, and attrition, he surrendered what remained of his forces. Approximately 90,000 German soldiers were taken prisoner. Fewer than 6,000 would survive captivity and return home. The destruction of the Sixth Army was not the result of panic, cowardice, or sudden collapse. It was the outcome of a single order, repeated long after reality had changed, an order that transformed discipline into paralysis and loyalty into a death sentence. Many of those who died at Stalingrad were not killed in dramatic final assaults. They died waiting for permission to move, to withdraw, to survive. After the war, German officers would describe Stalingrad not simply as a lost battle, but as one that was never allowed to end. The command to hold remained in force until there was nothing left to hold. And Stalingrad endures as one of history's clearest examples of how an inflexible order, enforced through rigid hierarchy and unquestioned obedience, can trap and destroy an entire army. Once an order is set in motion, it does not adapt on its own, and when command refuses to change faster than reality, obedience itself becomes fatal. Allez.